Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is October 17th, 2020, and I am your co host, the Fat Wizard, joined today by.
Alamaxia.
And Lobos.
And today, we're taking a look at The Seventh Guest, which was released on the PC April 1st, 1993. One heck of an interesting April Fool's joke, I guess.
Yeah, that actually sounds right. This is canon, I think. Write it in the books.
So I want to talk a little bit about the history about this game because I think it's really interesting. This game was, along with Myst, was actually touted as some of the biggest successes of the CD itself. And you just look at the history of when this was released, actually a really interesting time period. It came before Myst. And so I just find it really interesting in like the things that this game does and does pretty well. And you look at Myst, and you're like, well, Myst is a better puzzle game, but yeah, Myst actually came a little bit after this here. So I think it's interesting to have that in the back of your head as we're talking about this game, is almost being the very first Myst style game, and it's kind of a horror game. But Alamaxi, Lobos, I know this is your first time both playing this. Let's hear your thoughts on how you thought this game was.
Go, Lobos.
I definitely enjoyed it. I like puzzle games, and it had a good variety of puzzles. I still think that when this came out, it was probably at a time where you want to read some things in the user manual, So I think there are some issues that I had that might have cleared things up, at least just from telling, what the UI has and how to tell when you can go where, or if there's a puzzle you need to do, that sort of thing. I figured that out relatively quickly, but for a little while, I had to spend some time to figure that all out. But yeah. It's kooky. It's crazy. The acting is something.
Chewing up the scenery here, I think. Every single charming actor.
Yeah. It was good. It was a good time. I think it was like corny enough that it was still pretty darn entertaining, and people loved it.
And that corniness, I think, is really what helped to carry some of this, because it started out just like this. It didn't start out too scary, spooky. You're like not really sure what's going on here at the beginning. Just you have this toy maker who's having visions and making toys that's making kids sick. And throughout the game, it just progressively gets darker and darker from there, which it was still kooky throughout. The acting was still just as awesome as it was when it began. Awesome.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the intro, which we're watching right now. In summary, we have this character named Stauf, who is basically described as a loner, a drifter, and one day he robs a woman and beats her with her, beats her up, and
he takes her purse.
Yeah. Is the assumption that he kills her too?
Yeah, so he kills her and steals her purse, and that just kind of takes him down this road of, deplorable act after deplorable act.
Yeah, and so he has visions and of like a toy. He makes this toy. It becomes very, very popular. Everyone wants them, and he becomes very wealthy. And then he starts making dolls for children, and every child wants a Stauf toy. Stauf is the main character, kind of like the villain here. And after getting the dolls, the kids start getting sick, and the game kind of opens up with 6 guests being invited to the Stauf mansion. I think they all have like personal invitations, and they're just told that there's some sort of like wealth or mystery that they need to solve here. And as we're looking at right now, we actually see each character's introduction as they're walking into the mansion. And what I think is cool about this is each character has their own story and their own reasons for being there. And I think Alamax, you'll cover some of the characters here as we see them, right?
Yeah.
In a nutshell, it's basically, if you've seen the movie Clue, it's like it's the premise to Clue.
It really is, yeah.
There were even a few points in the game where I was like, oh, I just went from the conservatory to the kitchen again.
So Alamaxia, why don't you introduce us to some of the characters here? We don't have to go through all of them, but maybe some of the highlights there that you think are worth noting.
All right. One of the highlights I really think is worth noting is the guy that they showed at the very end there. And that one was Hamilton Temple. He is a stage magician. And he is here because he believes that Stauf possesses real magic. And all this stage magician wants is to experience real magic because he just knows, sleight of hand, magic stuff. Stage magic.
Yeah, I think that was kind of interesting because in some ways I actually kind of felt bad for him. His story is almost a tragedy, right? Where he's like he's nearing the end of his career and he's like I want to experience something truly magical. Can this be done? Can I get these powers? And ultimately he turns out to actually kind of help out the main character, and we don't want to go into spoilers quite yet.
He was definitely a bit more of the pure of heart of the characters, as opposed to Julia Hine, who was an older, pretty vain woman, and she was a former banker. She's a much older lady, has the red, I think it's like a red flower on the side of her head.
Yeah.
And she is very much the opposite. She will do whatever it takes to get whatever reward is at the end of this crazy invitation.
Yeah, she wants to become, she's much older now, and she has a desire to become, beautiful. And we see that a little bit later on in the video where some of her wishes come to fruition in sort of a crazy way here.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been introduced to the cast of characters real quickly here, and the way that the game kind of pans out is you go room to room and you see like their ghostly apparitions, and occasionally they'll kind of shed some light into the story, and it's semi non-linear. And so what that means is some of the rooms you can go into in any order, but there's a certain set where you have to complete a certain amount of puzzles, and then the house kind of mysteriously unlocks more rooms, and they don't really tell you that. But the first room we went into is the kitchen. Lobos, we have some delicious looking cake here. Do you want to talk a little bit about this puzzle?
So delicious. Yeah, it's a cake. Then there's skulls and gravestones, and then blank spots. Basically, it's a grid of cake. And if I recall correctly, you select a piece, and it'll rise out of the cake. And you need to select 2 skulls, 2 gravestones, and an empty space.
Yeah.
And
yes.
And the idea is you need to remove sections of the cake by pulling up those pieces. When you do that, it'll remove all of them. And
they have to be contiguous, right?
Yeah, they have to all be adjacent to each other. Like, not all adjacent, but forming like a line.
Yeah.
All sharing walls that you can draw your finger from one to the last. And if that works, then it removes them all. And if you're ever in a spot where you don't have that situation, well, you did it wrong. So you got to start over. So it's just kind of figuring out which chunks to take out of the cake first. It was it wasn't too bad. It was neat to figure out what the mechanics exactly were, and then fun to also find the solution, I think.
Yeah, the thing, I think the detriment to this puzzle game, and not every puzzle suffers from this because some of them are pretty obvious, and sometimes they'll give you clues. The cake one is pretty obvious, but they don't always spell out what you need to do. And there's a couple puzzles where I actually solved the wrong thing, so I was kind of frustrated, and that's why what I did do in the Discord there is I posted for each of the puzzle. I'm like, all right, here's the goal, because if you don't know the goal, sometimes it's a little frustrating. You'd be like, what am I even trying to do here?
Yeah. Well, one of the things you could do if you were unclear on the goal was there was a room in here. I always just called it a library. That had a book on the table, and you could go back to that book up to 3 times. Up to 2 times to get a clue about your puzzle. So it would usually give you an idea of what is your objective. Then the second clue would be closer to here's a hint on how to get to that objective, or here's a closer hint at the exact objective you're getting. So there's a puzzle much later on that has, you would think you would have it complete in one state, but no, it wants a different state of the puzzle.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and many times once you solve one of these puzzles, the little FMV thing will show a little bit more of the story. So that's your payout, right? Is you
Right.
solve a puzzle and then you get to watch a little bit. And again, this is one of these things where back in the day, just watching the FMV was a real treat, and that was the reward in and out of itself. And also, interestingly enough, a lot of the puzzles, when you are trying to solve them, you'll be interrupted by a little voiceover. So let's say that you're trying to, using that cake we were trying to take apart. Occasionally, as you were trying to move the cake puzzles around, a voice would interrupt with like a little clue. And again, back in the day, hearing that full speech was actually really cool. I think, though, when solving puzzles now, it just became a nuisance. You're like, nah, stop trying to tell me stuff, Stauf.
Yeah, some of those lines, as well as like the reset lines whenever you didn't solve it and you need to start over. I think it became a little memey. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time I heard "Don't take all night," like I would be so rich. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the movement in this game and how it differs from Myst in a way that I think is actually really cool. So if we imagine Myst, it was all pre-rendered, but they really just transition between screens. So you can almost think about Myst as like it's a game of screenshots, and you're just clicking from screenshot to screenshot.
Yep.
In The Seventh Guest, it's actually rendered, I guess, I don't know if real time or offline, but it basically does have smooth transitions. So it's almost like you actually do have a camera that is moving around the world, but it is attached to a spline. So, for instance, when you start the game, you're facing some stairs, and you can click on the stairs to go up, and the camera will kind of like do this transition like you're walking up the stairs. You can't stop you can't stop midway. But once you hit the top of the stairs, you can then go left or right, or you can turn around and then go back down the stairs. So actually really kind of cool. Although sometimes it was a little tough, like Myst, it was sometimes a little tough to figure out, like, okay, if I rotate left here, what am I actually going to be doing? And sometimes that rotating to the left would actually rotate you 180 degrees or whatnot.
Yeah. And especially since it's early, it was... It seemed to rotate at around like somewhere between 5 and 10 frames per second.
Very,
so you're like,
very slow.
I go, okay. And if you click the wrong one, you just have to sit there and wait. But yeah.
Now we're on another puzzle here, which is a canned good puzzle. Lobos, one of my favorite things about these retro streams these retro podcasts is watching you play these streams, play these games on stream. And I saw you kind of working on this one for a while. Why don't you walk us through the canned good puzzle?
Let's see. The canned good puzzle was the hint only in the journal in the library?
Yeah, that was the only one you
Okay.
could have known.
Yeah. So
by the way, this is in the kitchen, right?
Oh yeah. You go into the kitchen and you see an
Julia.
FMV of Julia.
Yeah.
Julia messing around in the pantry, kind of like curiously. So you open it up and there's several stacks of cans, and each can has a letter, and it doesn't say anything, but you need to figure out how exactly to put them into some sort of statement or sentence. And because you can tell that the cans are kind of spaced out. And if you go to the journal for the hint, I forget exactly what it says, if anybody has that handy, but it's basically synonyms for what you actually need to solve as words in the puzzles.
Yeah, the difficult thing is you get there, and it's just like 6 Ys. You have to
I don't
find.
think there's actually any vowels except
for
Y.
Y.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As a vowel.
And you're like, what the? I can't think of 6 words that have Y in them.
Right.
It's something. It's very convoluted, and you're like, yeah. I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of that puzzle at all.
I was not either. That was one I had to get a little bit more help on. I was able to get, I think, 4 of the words, but there's one word in there, tryst.
Yeah.
Tryst.
Yeah.
I was like, I've heard that word.
I
think.
I had gotten all the words but that one, so I just kind of process of eliminationed it. And then I was like, tryst? What? Yeah, that was not a word I was familiar with, so.
So I'm not sure if you have to solve that before you can move on to the maze, which is also in the kitchen. But real quick, okay, you do. Real quick, so. We went to the maze. You have to solve another puzzle to sort of like line up some grates to actually be able to fit through the wall, and then you can go into this arduous maze. But you see this ghostly apparition of this woman that sort of has like linen that's flowing, and you see her a couple times throughout the game, and she is beckoning you. Does anyone know who she is or what her purpose is? Because I couldn't figure that out.
I have no idea.
Also no idea.
Okay, I think it was just something spooky here.
Spooky, that's right.
So the maze, I think, Lobos, you and I both did the same thing, which was hug the left wall and just try to solve the maze, which
left
is
wall strats.
the
left wall strats.
In this particular maze, the absolutely wrong way to do it, because if you hug the right wall, it actually gets you to it closer. But I just did something real interesting I wanted to point out here in the video. I was going around in the maze, and I see a skeleton, and he's pointing one direction. I was like, okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to save my game here. And then I'm going to go that direction, and if it's not the way I want to go, then at least I have a marker. So I save my game, and by the way, when you save your game, you have to like go to the map menu. When I exited it, it sent me back to the beginning of the maze. And that is what I remember, that going into the menus in this game essentially throws you back to like one of the checkpoints that you're in. So you basically lose progress.
It like saves like... for the puzzle that you're on, not the progress on the puzzle. It'll just like put you in that room, and then you're just like,
So that was that was a huge disappointment. I had to redo that whole maze.
Yeah. Are you feeling
same thing happened to me?
Lonely?
As you're going through the maze, you'll hit a lot of dead ends, and Stauf recites that phrase over and over.
Lonely. Yeah, it was
so there is actually a clue to the maze. Did anyone find it?
I did.
Lobos?
I don't think I did.
I know you found it. You probably just didn't realize it. So in one of the later rooms, there's a rug.
I did.
Yeah.
I do remember, yeah.
There's a rug, and you click on it. By the way, if there's a puzzle, it'll have like a little, your mouse icon will turn to like a brain.
I was called that big brain time.
Big brain time.
Big brain time.
Big brain time.
And so on this particular one, you click on, there's a rug, and it shows like, I mean, it looks like a maze, but it doesn't necessarily look like a maze if you don't know what to expect. It looks like just an abstract pattern. But yeah, that has the solution for getting through the maze. And once you go through the maze, you end up at a bunch of crypts. There's 9 caskets. And what you have to do is, it's one of those lights out puzzles. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's one of these where it's like, if you toggle, so it's a 3x3 grid. And let's say that you toggle the thing in slot 1-1, then the thing in slot 1-2 will toggle, and the slot 2-1 will toggle. So that basically, anytime you change the state of one thing, it changes the state of everything adjacent to it. And the thing you're trying to do here is actually close all the caskets. Did you guys have any trouble with that one?
I definitely solved it all open, and then I was like, well,
yeah,
dang it, and then I had to do it all closed.
Yeah.
That one was a lot of trial and error for me. The lights out puzzles were ones I was never good with.
Okay.
Pathing puzzles,
I like those a lot.
I love pathing puzzles.
Sure. Yep. So once you solve that, you see a little cutscene with, is it Martine Burden? Is that who's there? Yeah. Because she's the she's sort of the, I guess if you want to call it a succubus, or sort of, sexy lady, seductress.
Floozy.
Yeah. She is trying to steal this little boy whose name is Tad. And I'm not sure if we're supposed to know why she wants a little boy. But she's trying.
It is not clear until the end.
Okay, so it's not clear why this little boy is wanted, but occasionally in these FMVs, they sort of interleave or horribly edit the footage to make them look scary. So like in this particular one, her head kind of gets big and a big snake tongue comes out of her mouth.
Yeah, she definitely had some kind of weird transformation happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think they like slam her head into a casket or something like that. I think that's where she supposedly dies within the plot. You don't actually see it, but you never see her again. So I think that the implication are that's where she dies. So there you go. But because again, some of these things are non-linear, we will technically see her in other portions of the game. Like we're seeing her right now. She's trying to seduce Edward Knox, right? Who is the husband of Eleanor Knox.
Yes.
And Edward, he's sort of like, I'd say he's an older man in sort of that midlife crisis where he wants to go back. He feels like he's, he's been tied down to his wife, and he wants to actually go back to the beginning of his life or with a full bank account and not have to be tied down by a marriage. So
he wants to feel young again.
Exactly.
Oh, and then his head turns into a goat.
Yeah. So the woman here, Martine, is seducing him. And as they kiss, he looks up and his head is replaced with a goat. And I guess that's sort of like what is that? Kind of like, hey, you're a fool sort of thing. I think that's what it's implying.
I have no idea.
I took it more so as like a satyr head, and that he was, and that he was being very, very just devilish in that moment.
Okay, yeah. Now we're in the room right across from where those two were getting it on. Into the place I was talking about with the rug with the maze. Do you want to talk about who's here, Alamaxia?
This is Eleanor Knox. She is a pretty decent woman. She loves her husband so much, and she really appreciates the finer things in life. She loves this room that she's in, and the thing with her is that I'm trying to remember. We see a lot of her just wanting to be a helpful person, really appreciating the things around her, and she just at times seems oblivious to some things that are there.
Yeah, she definitely does seem naive, and her big desire is she wants to start over again in life, but with her husband still at her side. So she's very devoted, very loves very much her husband, and I think we just saw that her husband kind of feels the opposite of her, unfortunately here. So after you check out that FMV, you're looking at the bishop puzzle. The objective here is you've got 4 bishops on the left. They are all white, and 4 bishops on the right. They are all black. And you need to get all the whites to the other side and all the blacks to the other side. So basically swapping those positions, which is actually much more difficult than it seems. Also the restriction with the movement is they can't threaten each other. So you couldn't put a bishop of one color in another position where the other one could take it over if it moved, using traditional chess rules. Right. This one was so hard for me. I ended up looking up a solution when I was about I had 1 left. I just could not figure out how to get that last one in. And
this was one of, I think, 2 things that took me a long time. And this one took me like an hour or 15 or something like that, hour and a half to get. But I finally got it.
Nice.
Oh, man. And then this portrait. Oh, geez.
Yeah, the music box and the stabby picture.
Yeah, once you solve that, you can kind of look around the room. And I think that's a famous photo, right?
It really did remind me of something that I'm not going to say had biblical just connotation, but it was something that felt from the Renaissance.
Yeah. So it was like a woman that was sort of draped over, I think a knee or something, and then some sort of monkey
she was like over a bed, like.
Oh yeah, and then a little monkey or small satyr was stabbing her in the chest with a knife repeatedly, and blood was trickling down. They do a lot of stuff like this. And actually, another area we saw at the top of the staircase is you click on a painting and some hands come out, and they're kind of like, woo, kind of pushing out of the painting like it wants to come out. And again, I chalk this all up to this was early technology, and we saw this in Myst, where it was like, look how cool this thing. You click on it and it spins around, and it was just, looks cheesy now, but I think it was one of these where people felt it was super cool.
You had an interactive environment.
Yeah,
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. That too.
Yeah. And so we're upstairs again, and we just saw that woman that we saw in the maze kind of float on by. She was beckoning us somewhere. I'm not really sure.
I think it's just direction, kind of.
Maybe it is kind of telling you, hey, there are rooms you can go over here now. I'm not really sure. But she did
seem to be kind of like the follow me. This is the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
And we did just see in the hallway, as we moved down a little bit more, we saw Tad, the little boy, running away, and we had Hamilton Temple, the stage magician, actually trying to catch him. He's like, hey, you got to come with me. And the boy's like, get away. So you start to see there's something interesting going on there. And then we go into another room here, and this is this Julia?
I'm honestly not sure, because the outfit changed. I didn't remember anyone having a green outfit except for in this scene.
Yeah, I think this is Julia, because she basically wants to become young and beautiful again. And so you see her looking in the mirror. She's like, oh, if only I was young and beautiful. And she starts to become, younger, and, maybe like 30. And she's like, oh, this is perfect. And then she turns 16. And she's like, wait, this isn't right. And then it kind of cuts away, and you see a little baby crawling on the floor with a green dress. It's actually kind of comical.
Be careful what you wish for, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's a rug on the room here, and this was a pretty easy puzzle. This is like one of those puzzles where you're trying to complete a circuit. So you're trying to go from point A to point B, and it happens to be the heart to maybe an artery or something, and you have to flip the little chambers to direct the blood flow. Lobos, you and I solved this the same way. What was your strategy, Lobos?
You just work backwards from like the end and flip where you can and try and find the path there. But it was pretty quick to do. Yeah, it's kind of like a pipe dream puzzle, sort of. Yep.
Pipe dream. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, pipe dream.
Yeah, because if you work backwards, there's actually the first 3 or 4 switches have to be a certain way, or else you wouldn't be able to actually get the blood out there. So that kind of simplifies things. And then, it's kind of cool. Once you solve that, you actually see Hamilton and Tad talking more. So this appears to be chronologically, this happens before you see that little sequence where Tad is running away and Hamilton is there. Or you know what? Maybe not.
Maybe not, because he
dies here.
Now we see him getting killed, strangled by who we thought was Julia. But maybe he doesn't die.
Yeah, he does die there.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's very hard to understand the chronology, and I'm sure that there's a way to break this down. But because things can happen out of order, it's sometimes hard to be like, wait, weren't you dead? How did you? What? Did you actually die? So
I think in some cases there might have been even some rooms later on that you couldn't get to where, like for example, this magician. I don't think I don't know if you were able to get to this room before you did the death room. So in a way, it was up to you as the player to piece all of these things together. I almost thought of like, at first I thought that we were like an investigator going in and investigating this and having to piece it all together and be like, oh, it's Colonel Mustard in the conservatory.
Sure. Yeah, it is worth noting that when you come into the house, so first of all, when you, at the very beginning of the game, the game's called The Seventh Guest. You only see 6 guests come in. So it's like, that's kind of weird. Also, why am I here? Because you sort of start the game and your guy's like, he says to himself, because he kind of actually talks to himself, right?
Sure.
And he says like, why am I here? What? I don't remember anything. And so you start to wonder like, what's going on in here? And also all these characters that you see are no longer in the house. So you do get the sense that this stuff has all happened in the past. And like you said, It seems like you're an investigator, right? But if you were an investigator, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you know what you were investigating, you know?
Yeah,
So let's continue a
pretty
little bit
obscure.
more on the billiards room or the game room. This is a very, very classic puzzle, and I'm a big fan of the Professor Layton games, and they use this all the time. This is the 8 queens puzzle. You're given a standard size chessboard, and your goal is to position 8 queens such that none of the queens put each other in danger.
Right.
And so, Alamaxia, what was your strategy for this one? Do you remember?
I like to do a lot of chess puzzles. So this one for me was just I started out placing the queens a knight's jump away from each other, and got my way all the way to the end to where they started canceling each other out, and it was just trying to find, okay, if I move this queen here, then that opens up these other angles for the other ones. It was very much it was looking at it more of a chess puzzle than just place them randomly around the board.
Yeah, I actually kind of did the same thing where I positioned them very very far from each other, right? So you like the first column would be maybe at the top left, and then the second column maybe like 3 down, and so you sort of keep staggering them like that.
Yeah, I staggered. Went straight down the line. I put one at like 1-1, then I put one at like 2-2, 3-3, and basically did that until they started overlapping each other, and then I would just put the new one where it would go, and then I solved for the other one.
Yeah,
and just kind of working through that. It worked itself out pretty quickly.
That's
so
cool.
Yeah,
It wasn't too bad.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not
The
sure.
bishop one took me way more time.
Yeah, the bishop one took forever.
Oh, yeah.
I actually, I as I mentioned, I actually looked up the solution at the end there. And I think this is more or less like the halfway point. I think once you solve enough puzzles, you can go into the library, and this seems to be the point in which all the house guests get back together after spending some time in the house and sort of like, I heard you banging around in that room. What's going on? And they're like, I wasn't banging around. You were banging around. And so you get the sense that almost like there's this paranoia going on between the house members. And it's like, all right, this is where things are going to start getting interesting, right? Because what I was going back to that Clue, I think about like the Clue movie where people just start ending up dead. I was kind of hoping for more reactions there. Because for most part, the deaths of the characters seem to have no real meaning for other characters. It's not like they see someone die and then everyone's like, oh no. It's just everyone kind of is split off the house on their own, and they just kind of keel over one by one.
Well, they were told, I believe, fairly early on, and I think they discussed it in the library, that Stauf brought them there, and they have, if they can bring Stauf what he wants, then he will give them anything that they desire, their greatest wish. And so that in a way just begins to poison and corrupt everyone's minds.
Yeah.
Because, well, okay, that person died. That's one less person that I have to compete with.
Yep, true. It doesn't poison everyone's minds. As we mentioned, Hamilton is one of the pure people here. And there was another character that also helps.
Eleanor Knox.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was very nice.
Yeah, both of them are very nice. Ultimately, what we find, and I'm not sure if it's revealed yet, but we'll find out pretty soon, what Stauf is looking for is the boy, Tad. And let's talk a little bit about Tad while we're here. I'm not sure if I have it in the video, but a little bit later on in the game, you understand that Tad is actually the 7th guest. And he's sort of an uninvited guest. He is a child that lives next door to the Stauf mansion. And he is dared to enter the house. And did you guys see that sequence where you go down into the kitchen and you see him sneak through the window and kind of run off into the house?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, and you kind of hear some kids outside of it, like daring, like, oh, do it.
No, I don't think I saw that.
Yeah, it's one of these. I think you have to get far enough along in the puzzles, and you have to go to the kitchen.
Kind of retrace.
Yeah, so that kind of gives you the clue of, okay, that's the 7th guest definitively. And as we've already kind of seen, the characters have started to realize that Tad is the seventh guest, what Stauf wants, and they're all trying to take the boy. Whereas, Hamilton and Eleanor are actually trying to get the boy out of the house here. So I think that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Moving on to one of the next puzzles, we're in, I'm not sure which room this is, but I think this is this where Brian, I think this is where Brian dies. Because, so at some point, Brian gets stabbed repeatedly by Edward when they're fighting over Tad. So yeah.
No, that's the piano room. I remember that very clearly.
So we haven't got to that part yet, but
no.
But chronologically, this happens after that, because what happens? Brian comes in here and he sees a chest or a briefcase full of money. And he gets excited about that, and as he opens it, his wounds all open up, and he dies. So,
oh boy,
that's weird. But this one's kind of cool because this is a coin puzzle, and what you need to do is you need to flip the coins over in a particular sequence. And I guess it's a little difficult to describe the sequence here, but a good way to think about this is if you've ever been to Cracker Barrel. Actually, a lot of the puzzles are very much like Cracker Barrel puzzles, right? Where it's sort of like you have all right, so you have a coin, you have to flip it over here, and if you flip this one over, you can only flip things that are up and down to it. So you have to sort of like plan your flips around. Did anyone else catch the Cracker Barrel reference here?
I did with there's like the tee hopping game, like golf tee hopping game.
Yes.
Like there's that
felt
later.
very Cracker Barrel.
And I was like, oh yeah, it's this game. And I've done that one a bunch. So now, but there's two puzzles, this one and the one we just saw before this, which is a card, and they work similarly such that you flip over a coin or a card, and then you can move cardinal directions from there. So left, right, up or down. And you can jump gaps, but you cannot retrace your steps.
Yep.
And so they give you these patterns, and you just go through. And if you ever reach a dead end based on those rules, then you have to restart the puzzle. So the goal is obviously just to flip all the coins or all the cards.
And Stauf takes so much glee in seeing your failure. He's like, ha!
I was doing that second one several times, and I kept hearing him go, and just every time I was like, I knew it was coming. It was good.
One of the things that caught me in the card one that I didn't realize is I could jump over a line that I already made.
Yeah.
So that was one that I was like, wait a minute, this isn't solvable unless
to
jump it.
After you solve that puzzle, you see Brian, take the money and then die. And then you see Brian walk through the door into this chapel. I don't know. But yeah, so you follow Brian into this chapel, and you see at the far end an altar that is draped in a red linen cloth, and we'll get to that in a bit. But first you have to solve a really weird puzzle. And this one, you have to go from point A to point B. And also, you can't retrace your steps, because what happens is you step on these little bricks, and then the bricks fall down, but they fall down in a certain way. Does anyone know how this puzzle works?
So I think what it was is you had to get rid of all of the orange blocks.
That's not quite right.
No?
But there are three different colors. So there is yellowish/orange, purple, and blue. And the way that so you basically step on them, and as you step on them, after you step on a certain amount of them, they actually will fall away. And it's actually based on the colors. So again, I actually did this a little bit by trial and error, but there is a set way in which the bricks fall away. And what you have to do is you have to get to the end on the very last, such that is the last step that makes all the ones behind you fall away. If that makes sense.
Right.
So what you can't, so what you can't do is go to like the end and have a tile that is still depressed behind you. All the tiles that you have walked on have to fall away on that last step. And it's really confusing because the puzzle clues seem to indicate all you have to do is go from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And so you do that, and you're like, well, and Stauf's like, ha! and you're like, well, I've made it to the end, but yeah, it's a little weird. Yeah. And there is a way that you basically math out the colors to correspond to how it falls. But I just kind of lucked into the solution.
Yeah, I tried to just like make as many drop as I could while reaching the end still, without cutting off your exit, and it happened to work. And I was like, okay.
And then you go up to the altar here, and you see Brian, and who is this with him? This is this Edward, or is this Stauf? It's hard to tell.
I feel like that's supposed to be Stauf.
Yeah, I feel like that too, but I don't.
And he hands him a dagger, or it's actually more of a gladius. And I guess there's a baby. I don't know where this baby comes from, but I think the intent is that he's supposed to sacrifice the baby on the altar.
I wonder if the baby was intended to be Martine or Julia Hine, or who is that lady that turned into a baby?
Yeah, Julia. Yeah, Julia. Oh, that's interesting. If that's actually the case, wow.
Oh no,
cool.
No, that.
No, it's not her.
We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about that a little bit later. And then let's chat about this briefly here, because I don't have a lot of footage, but there's certainly a lot to talk about in the microscope puzzle. Who wants to talk about this dumb puzzle?
Well, it's Reversi. If anyone's ever played Reversi or Othello, it's basically that, except a slightly modified. In Reversi or Othello, you traditionally start out as two opposing colors, black and white, and you would normally start out in the middle of this, I think it's an 8x8 grid. And you have two black pieces, two white pieces. They're diagonal from each other. And they grow. You get more pieces if you can move one from one spot to an adjacent spot. You get an additional piece in that spot, like you get more. If you put that piece next to an opponent's color, then you take all of the opponent's colors that piece lands next to. You can also jump. So you can take, instead of growing a piece adjacent, you can take your piece and jump it up to 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
And you won't grow your piece, but you can maybe jump over your enemy's wall to get behind them and take over a whole bunch of their little pieces.
And that was basically a death sentence for me, because every single time I jump, I would open myself up to the computer going in and just annihilating me. So
the computer in this was brutal.
Yeah. So the way I solved this, I think Lobos, you actually solved it naturally, but I didn't because I got sick of it. This is an optional puzzle, so you don't have to do it. But the way I did it, actually kind of interesting. So let's talk a little bit about computer AI and sort of like chess AI. The way that chess AI works is it sort of like maps out all the possible sequences and layers deep. So it says like, all right, here's all the things I could do on turn 1. And on turn 2, here's all the things I can do. And then on turn 3, here's all the things I can do. And it's basically every time you go down one layer deep, it becomes computationally more and more expensive, but also that much better of a program because it can sort of basically predict the future 3 turns ahead.
Right.
And so what I actually found was something that could predict the future 4 turns ahead. So what I did is I would basically put in the computer's move, and then my AI would run 4 levels deep, and it would say, all right, move here. And so that's how I won. Nice. Super impressed with whoever wrote that. That was genius. I did not like that game. I'm not good at it. So never want to play it again.
People told me, and I don't know how true it is, that the AI, computing it was much worse on, older hardware because it could only go so far in a certain amount of time. But because our computers are so fast now, it just cycles just go, and it just figures out all sorts of moves ahead of time. And
the Scum VM has basically a cap on it to how quickly it can go, but it was tied to the your computer's processing speed, how difficult that AI was.
We are masters of our own demise.
Yeah. That felt like playing against a chess grandmaster. It was just, I couldn't make a move without knowing it was bad before I made it.
And the thing that was frustrating is I was like, all right, let's see what the computer does in this situation. And it's like, all right, next time I'll do this. And so I do that, and it does an even better move to counter. I'm like, how am I supposed to beat this? Okay.
And then you try to mimic its moves, and it's like, nope, I'm just going to beat you anyway.
Yeah, in the end, I spent over 2 hours on it. And the final match was like, the last like maybe 15 moves were like 15 minutes, longer than that even. And we were just sitting there like, okay, this if he does this and then this, and me and chat all together, we just hive minded it, and it was
That's
great.
awesome. And every time you move, it was like,
yeah. And I hear slurps in my nightmares now.
All right, so let's move on from that. That is probably the scariest part of this game. Now we move on to a little ditty featuring the Stauf piano. This is one of those very, very classic puzzles where you repeat the note. So it plays one note, you play one note. It plays two notes, you play two notes. And usually those puzzles end at about 8 or 9. That's a pretty good one. I think I actually wrote it down around 20 because I'm like, I'm not redoing this. And I think it has 21 or 22 notes.
18.
18. Yeah, it was long. And I did it. I managed to do it first try because I caught on what it was doing at first. Yeah. And then the entire time I just stared and didn't look at chat or anything. And I just kept it in my mind and kept replaying it in my mind and managed to do it. But oh my gosh, it went so long.
I imagine, Lobos, you're having nightmares of the slurp noise set to the background of the piano playing here.
We just do. Yeah.
Now, the good thing is there's really only, they give you maybe, I don't know, half a piano worth of real estate to actually hit. And I think they only use maybe a third to maybe a half of the actual keys.
A total of 8 keys.
8 keys there.
Oh, okay.
So, it's just a lot of back and forth. But, yeah, once you complete this is where I think you were talking about Brian gets stabbed trying to capture Tad. And I think Edward, Edward Knox is the one that ends up stabbing him. And Edward is here with Martine, his love interest, I guess, as it turns out. And she's kind of pushing him on the group, saying, "Hey, you need to get Tad for us." And then Brian has a very interesting. First of all, I'm not sure why he has a dagger with him. It looks actually more like a sai. Like you think.
Yeah, it looks like a sai.
Like Mike, like Raphael from the Ninja Turtles.
Exactly.
And I don't know. This is where the acting gets really good because as he's being stabbed, it's just everyone is really trying their best to make their paycheck on this, right? I don't know. I love this so much. And what's great is the blood obviously is added in post processing or in post.
Microsoft Paint.
Yeah, it looks like somebody basically took the images of this video, the frames, and just painted on it with MS Paint pencil, like red pencil. But it's good. It was good.
Now we're in the bathroom here, which I looked at the floor as okay, I see white and black square tiles, and it's another chess puzzle.
Time to do a chess puzzle!
Real quick before we get started here, I want to talk about, because it's not in the video, the game has a couple different shortcuts, which usually you click on by accident, and you're like, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. This one was super cool, though. You go down a sink drain, and there's all these black widow spiders that are crawling around, and they're really big, and it's like, oh man, that is creepy.
Who knows how you go down the sink drain, but you do it, and then you have to run all the way back to that room to do the chess puzzle or whatever.
Well, this one is an interesting one. This is one of those that I attempted to solve the wrong way. So the way that this works is you have a 5x5 grid, and they're full of knight chess pieces. Half of them are black, half of them are white, and I think the clue, again, sometimes they give you clues as you're trying to solve it. I think they said something like swapping positions or swapping colors or something like that. So I'm like, oh, I understand here. All the white knights have to go in the gray spots, and all the black knights have to go in the white spots.
Oh no!
And that is not at all what you're supposed to do. Lobos, why don't you tell us what we're supposed to do? Also, if you can remember the catchphrase that Stauf taunts us with.
Don't take all night.
You get it?
Yeah.
Because it's a knight.
Because they're knights.
You're moving knights.
Yeah, so it's a 5x5 and it's full of knights except for the center. And I figured because of the bishop swapping puzzle before that this was also a swapping puzzle. So that whether that was, it was correct, but luckily that did lead me down the right path. But it's basically one corner is filled to the brim with white knights, and the other one, opposite corner, is filled with black knights, and you have to swap them, and you only have one space in which to move knights, and so you put one there, and then wherever that knight was, you have to jump to there, and you have to slowly but surely reverse the entire layout of the puzzle, and it's fun.
And it's like so many puzzles in this, you would get to the point where there's like one off.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm going to have to just dissect this entire puzzle to get that one where it needs to go, aren't I?
Yeah. Usually there's like a pattern or some point in the movement where you could like swap a couple of pieces just to get them ready to where they need to go. And you have to undo a lot to do that.
Spin pattern that you could follow to basically move a knight diagonally.
Okay. And after you do that, you're treated to an FMV of Martine Burden in the she's taking a bubble bath, drinking a little champagne, relaxing. And she gets sucked underwater and presumably drowns, but you hear a screaming noise, so maybe doesn't drown. I don't know. She's probably dead though. Who cares? We don't see her again. All right, Lobos.
She's pulled underwater.
No.
Why don't you talk about, because I know you're the master at this next puzzle here. Why don't you talk about where we are and what puzzle we're looking at?
We're in a room now. There was like a doll on the table. It seemed like a kid's room, if my memory treats me correctly.
Yeah.
Like a nursery.
Nursery. And on a table, there's a square. It looks like a slide puzzle at first, and I was like, "Yeah, slide puzzle, cool." But what is it's a 3x3 of tiles that would fill up a picture, that would make a full picture, and there's little buttons, kind of that a button for each row and column, and if you click a button next to a row, it will flip all three images, but they're in a sequence. So if instead of pictures they were numbers and you click the button, the 1 would turn to 2, and then if you clicked it again, the 2 would turn to 3, etc. And the idea is to have every tile be different and form the full picture, which apparently is Alamaxia did a whole chart or whatever on this thing, so he can tell me, but
he made an Excel sheet.
Some people said that it potentially would be unsolvable at first. Is that true?
Yeah, so what happened is the Scum VM also introduced a bug to this, and I haven't figured out exactly why. I'm guessing it's probably a rounding issue, but what happened was it was very easy with this puzzle to be able to get 2 rows to be correct, but if on your final row you had 2 of the same image, it was unsolvable. And that happened in probably about 1 out of every 3 that I went in to do it. I was like, okay, this is absolutely unsolvable. But I have the initial workings of a calculator that I could eventually put this out on if there's like a 7th Guest wiki out there, I'm sure, to where someone could put in like what's their initial configuration, hit a button, and it'll tell them if they can solve it or not.
Nice.
So.
Yeah,
that'll be fun to figure out.
I think I just kept resetting until there were no duplicates at all, which took a while, but it did eventually happen, and then I was able to solve it.
I got really lucky on this one. I was like, is this even a puzzle? Because everything just lined up for me on the first try, so no problems here.
Wow.
After my little victory there, I actually went, and we just saw in the kitchen, Tad came in, and then I actually hurried on back. This was actually really cool. So we go back to that little nursery, and then there's a dollhouse. Yeah. And you can click on that dollhouse, and you sort of shrink and go into a baby room. And there's going to be another puzzle here with some bricks. And this is another one that I sort of was trying to solve incorrectly, because the bricks are a 3x3 grid, and the intent is you're supposed to spell out 3 words. So you have left to right, you'd have basically 3 words. But what I thought I was thinking this was more of a, like, you'd have to spell 9 words. So like up and down and left and right and diagonals. So I was actually trying to solve a much harder problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Alamaxia, how did you do on this one?
I did very poorly on this one. I got some official backseating from my friends, and I started rambling off all the different 3-letter words that could be formed, and they're like, it's those 3.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's a little disappointing here is, so the solution is get boy Tad.
Which makes sense now.
Which makes sense, but I don't think that we knew that Tad was the character's name.
I definitely did not. But I will say that, having seen you do it just now, that it started the puzzle completely backwards. On the bottom was get backwards, and then it was boy backwards in the middle, and then Tad backwards on top. So looking at that, I'm like, what? They had that the whole time, and I didn't know. Oh.
That's interesting.
I wonder if that is how the game introduces the boy's name.
Ooh.
Maybe.
Now, I would have expected that to be randomized, but it's interesting.
The problem with that is if you miss that initially, then it's all scrambled, and so good luck.
So we're approaching the end of the game here. After you solve a bunch of puzzles, you can go down into the main foyer here, and you can look at the artwork at the bottom or on the floor, and that actually teleports you into an art gallery. Mm-hmm. And in here, there's a bunch of paintings. One of the paintings has a picture of Stauf, and Stauf has it's basically a lights out puzzle, but a little more complicated because there's 3 states. So if you think about a traditional lights out, it's either lights on or lights off. This one is it was a little different, where it's Stauf normal, Stauf demonic, and then Stauf, I don't know, green.
Goblin
Stauf, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't have too much of a trouble with this one. Alamaxia, I think you talked a little bit about how you had a little bit of troubles. Why don't you talk about some of the issues you found with this puzzle?
Yeah, this one, like I said, I've not been too great at the lights out puzzles, and I kind of bashed my head against the wall on this for a bit. Got to the point where I had his entire face green at one point, but the game didn't like that.
By the way, it doesn't tell you what you're supposed to do. So there's like, you could solve it 3 different times before actually getting the real solution.
Right. So I went back to the library, and it gave me a clue, and it's like, oh, you want it this way, okay. Went back, tried to do it again, and still couldn't get it. And I discovered that if you go back to the library enough times after failing a puzzle, and then the game's like, well, you just go by the puzzle. You don't even need to do it.
Yeah.
So it just solved the puzzle for me.
Yeah, they don't really give you. I think maybe in the manual that tells you that, but it doesn't really tell you, hey, if you click on this 3 times, it's just going to solve the puzzle outright for you.
Right. Yeah.
And after that, you are then allowed to go into the spooky final hallway here, which, by the way, I just want to talk about the layout of the mansions. I think it's so cool, especially some of the hallways that are super narrow, and you just feel the sense of dread kind of going down there. And like, this was the room, this was the wing that was off limits for the whole game. I'm super excited to see what's in here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Was there a gap in the floor here, or did it... Because I know you couldn't move up to this door that we're at now, but I kept trying to go down that hallway, and it just wouldn't let you, and I wasn't sure if there was...
There's no gap.
It only lets you when you can interact with the door.
Sure, yeah.
And this one, before you can go in the door, there's a door knob. Like, think about one of those door knockers that you grab a handle and kind of bang on the door, and you see a pentagram on the forehead of, it looks like a golem or something here affixed to the door. And this was your classic Cracker Barrel puzzle, which where you have to jump the what do they call them, the
tees.
Golf tees. Yeah,
it's like jump the pegs.
So there's only one left, and then once you go in there, you can go into the room, and I think you go up the stairs into the attic, And this is cool.
Yeah.
I love this area because it seems super dark and foreboding. Now, Alamaxia, I'm going to let you talk about this next puzzle because you claim that there's some way to know how to solve this. So why don't you set up the puzzle and tell us how you solve it?
Yep.
So the way this puzzle works is there's 3 layers, top, middle, bottom. You start out on the bottom. There's 4 different types of windows. On the bottom layer, there's you can, instead of thinking it as 2 sides of a house, you have 5 windows vertical and 8 windows horizontal. And the way this works is you start on the bottom and you pick a window. Whatever direction you move is the only direction you can move from that type of window for that attempt. So if you start on a square window and you move up, then you can only move up on square windows.
Oh.
You cannot move right, you cannot move left, you cannot move down, and you cannot use the same direction more than once. So once you defined 3 of the window directions, then the 4th one was defined, and that's why you would get those instances where, like, you just clicked the right on a half circle and it continued to the right. That's because the next one was a half circle and you can only go right.
That is really cool and much better than the way I interpreted it, which was just try every sequence and eventually you'll hit the end. And that's what I did.
So, yeah, I didn't know about the programming your own window direction, but once I solved the bottom, it's kind of interesting because I made note of what I thought each window did. It just so happened that I programmed it myself to do that. And so since I had that written down, I just kept going with that in mind, and I was able to finish it. And then at the end, everybody was like, "Yeah, you programmed that yourself." And I was like,
I think there is actually only one solution to it, though. Okay. So it just so happened to be, I guess, that works out that way. And I didn't notice that.
Wow, that's
that ended
crazy.
up being the same directions for the shapes.
So you mentioned there's 4 layers. As you go from layer to layer, if you mess up on a layer, it actually brings you back to the beginning. But I ended up just writing down the solutions for each layer, so it became very easy for me to quickly. I honestly just brute forced my way through the whole puzzle.
Yeah.
So now we're up in the attic again, and we see Julia. Right, Julia has finally captured Tad and is ushering him into Stauf's lair, and so we're about to see that. But before we get there, we find a mirror, and you look in the mirror and you see a shimmering version of Tad, and your character's kind of like, I remember. I remember this happening before, right? And you go into the final room. Who wants to talk about the final room here?
Go for it, Lobos.
I don't remember the final. No, I mean, I don't remember exactly what happens.
Okay, well, I can talk about it.
Okay,
go for it.
All right, so we enter the room and we see Stauf in a wheelchair, and he's like, "Bring me the boy." And Julia drops him in, and she's saying, "I brought you the boy. Now you'll give me whatever you want." Boy's like, "Oh no, it's Tad. He's not trying to run away." And Stauf goes, "Lady, you're not going to get what you want." Pukes on her feet, and she just kind of melts into the ground. What's happened is Stauf has formed a demonic pact with the demon that was giving him the visions and allowing him to basically create these dolls, and it gave him the powers to do that. And as the boy tries to run away, he lashes out with a prehensile tongue and holds the boy and tries to bring him back to him, because, I mean, Stauf is in a wheelchair. He can't get up and chase him.
Yeah.
But in the end, the boy is able to break free and escape Stauf.
Well, he's only able to break free because you help him, right?
Yes. You were able to, in a way, help change Tad's fate.
Because you are Tad. Right? And so that's, I think, Lobos, you're like, hey, how can you fit through those storm drains? I think what we find out is you're like this weird entity, I guess.
You're a spoopy ghost.
You're a spoopy ghost. You are Tad, like honestly his ghost. And so what happens is you're actually like reliving these moments, and then you finally change the fate of Tad and allow him to break free. And I guess then that ends up killing you or something, or not killing you, but
I thought you were just adult Tad the whole time, but
no, but Henry Stauf, because he was not able to take Tad and you were able to save Tad, then the demon sees that Stauf has failed and sucks him down into a fiery abyss.
Yeah, and also what's really cool here is Faust is an anagram of Stauf. So if anyone remembers the Dr. Fausto, the German story about a individual who wanted infinite knowledge, basically, he made a pact with the devil, and basically to be granted that. And I think it was one of these things where it's like after so many years, he basically has agreed to sell or for the devil to like steal his soul or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of a throwback to that story, and I thought that was really cool. And at the end, I'll tell you what, it plays the credits, and I love this song. It's playing. I don't remember the name of the song here, but it's by this artist named The Fat Man.
The Fat Man.
It's called Skeletons in My Closet. It's a little bit a little jazzy, and it's super cool. It's I wouldn't have expected that to be the closing number here, but I think it works out pretty well. Lobos, what did you think about the song?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a little jazzy, little murder mystery maybe. Yeah. So it fits, I think. Yeah. Good close to it.
Yeah.
The music in the game overall had a very you said the right words there, murder mystery. It felt like I was in like one of those crime drama radio shows from the 50s, because you're walking around the house and it's like
it's very cool.
It's very sneaking around kind of detective music.
Yep.
And then they have this nice jazzy tune that for the time period that the game is supposed to be set in, the mid 1930s, it fits in perfectly. Perfect.
It's really good. One last note, I just wanted to I think again, I think Myst and this game are both interesting. I think Myst is probably more fun to play, but I think we really need to give credit where credit is due here to the importance of the seventh guest for video game technology. So again, this game was released in 1993, and as of July 1995, it was the best-selling game on CD-ROM. It had sold 1.5 million copies, and at the time, Myst had 1.1 million. So again, I think everyone talks about Myst, and for good reasons, but this game was hugely influential, and it was fun to boot. It definitely has its issues, and I think going back through some of the puzzles, they became a little cumbersome, and I kind of wonder if the 11th guest is better set up for some interesting puzzle solving there, and everything's very campy, but I enjoyed my time.
I started playing the 11th hour.
Oh yeah,
and it was all right, but then I got frustrated at a puzzle, and then I left and I stopped.
Oh, no.
So there was a puzzle that I solved, and it was like a cash register, and it started off with like one high value and a low value, and you had to basically make it so both numbers were the same number.
Yeah.
And I solved that, and then we were trying so much stuff, and it turns out that you just had to solve it with particular buttons being depressed instead of like any, like it checked for specific levers being pushed down instead, and there were like a bunch of different combinations. So I just found a video on YouTube and then managed to enter it, and I was like, oh no.
Did any of you actually read that at the very end of the credits there, the little there were no animals harmed in the making of this game, yada yada. There's some fun little added things there. I didn't catch everything.
They said all the people making this game stayed at the Bates Motel, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah. So that is the 7th guess. I gave my little spiel. Let's hear it. Closing from Alamaxia and Lobos. What did you guys think about this game?
Initially, I struggled with it because it was very rough on the edges as far as the graphics go, and I wasn't quite ready for that. But the puzzles drew me in. I found myself spending way more time on some puzzles than I should have, just because I was having so much fun trying to figure them out. This game came across to me as a type of game I love playing now, walking simulators.
Yeah.
With just the good puzzles in there. It was,
Good puzzle. Yeah. Sure.
it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love me a good puzzle game, and anytime you mention that a game has like FMV, like I know you're in for a good time. At least, especially the classic ones, because they're usually they're so
Low budget.
corny.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you both enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, everyone, for listening to us here on the podcast. And we wanted to shout out all of our Patreon supporters for helping to make this possible. If you enjoy the show and you want to keep supporting us, you can head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Gaming Show to learn more. As a reminder, we still have that Patreon goal. If we can get 25 Patreon supporters, we will cover Earthbound, which seems like a really crazy game as well to check out.
Quite a crazy game.
Yeah.
And good.
I was just going to say, and next, we've got
I'm
a
thinking,
very cool game. Right?
Should we maybe join the rest of our world and go a little apocalyptic with our next game?
I think so. A little dystopian, a little futuristic, maybe a little Deus Ex Machina. That's right. We're going to be checking out Deus Ex for the PC. And again, this is one I played a good 20 years ago. Alamaxia and Lobos, I don't think you've played it, right?
I began the second one, but I didn't complete it. And I also played. I also played some Human Revolution, and I also did not complete that.
That's a little bit better. Yeah, Invisible War is the black sheep of the the Deus Ex.
Fair enough.
So this will be a fun little RPG FPS hybrid with a pretty interesting story, and some wicked trench coats. Matrix style.
Of course.
With sunglasses. Everyone's got to look cool.
Oh, yes.
So sadly, we have reached the end credits of this episode. So again, we want to thank everyone for watching us on the podcast, or even listening to us on the podcast, or watching us on LobosJr's YouTube channel. Right? We started publishing that recently.
Yes, that's right. We're releasing episodes every Saturday until we're all caught up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But for the podcast, we release our podcast monthly. So make sure to follow and subscribe to us on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah, if you have any feedback, please shoot us an email, SaturdayMorningGamingShow@gmail.com.
Or follow us on Twitter @SaturdayMGaming.
And a big special shout out to TechnoAxe for the spooky music at the start of this episode.
For Saturday Morning Gaming, I'm Alamaxia.
And I'm Lobos.
And I'm the Fat Wizard. We'll see you in November with Deus Ex for the PC.